Audio Jungle.
It was in my heart to build a house for the name of the Lord, my God. After defeating his enemies and sitting securely on his royal throne,
Audio Jungle.
King David decided to fulfill his life's dream, to establish on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem a temple for the God of Israel. This was a true drama. David's plan would end the era of the wandering tabernacle of God, which had accompanied the Israelites since they left Egypt. Instead of the modest tabernacle, David envisioned a magnificent temple, and within it, the Ark of the Covenant from Sinai. A temple that would make Jerusalem, the kingdom's capital, the spiritual center for the people of Israel, and a source of inspiration for all of humanity.
To be renowned and glorified throughout all the lands.
But then, just moments before he began the work, he received a message that changed the entire picture. You have shed much blood and have waged great wars. You shall not build a house for my name, for you have shed much blood on the earth in my sight. Nathan the prophet informs David in God's name that he, David, a man of war, could not build the temple of life and peace. His son Solomon would build it. This would be his life's mission. In a historic move, in the 4th year of his reign, Solomon set out to fulfill his father's vision and establish on the summit of Mount Moriah a spiritual center, the likes of which the world had never seen. The first temple in the history of the Jewish people, and the only one in the entire world dedicated to the one God. Building materials poured in from every direction. Giant stones were quarried from the rocks of Jerusalem. Copper from the mines of the Negev. From distant Tarshish, silver ingots were brought, and 420 talents of gold were transported to the kingdom by ships from Ophir in Africa. When Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon, son of his friend David, needed cedar trees to build a temple for the God of Israel, he rushed to send him the finest trees, whose fame was renowned throughout the world. The mighty cedars, the glory of Lebanon, were considered the pinnacle of splendor in ancient time. And the Phoenicians had a long-standing heritage of growing these magnificent trees, felling them and transporting them. The Bible tells us that to assist Hiram's workers, Solomon conscripted tens of thousands of laborers from his people who were sent to work in Lebanon in shifts. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month. They would be in Lebanon for 1 month and 2 months at home. The fascinating method they used to transport the giant trees hundreds of kilometers to Jerusalem can be learned from Assyrian reliefs on display at the Louvre Museum in France. The reliefs show Phoenician ships carrying cedar logs on the high seas. Some of the trees were loaded onto the ships, while others were tied to the ships and dragged through the water. This is exactly how Hiram describes the delivery of the trees to their destination. My servants will carry them down from Lebanon to the sea, and I will send them in barges at sea to the place you will send me. I am in the old port of Jaffa. Here, at the ancient port of Jaffa, Solomon's workers collected the trees and, with the help of hundreds of oxen and wagons, transported them to Jerusalem. The main building material for the construction of the temple is limestone, which is found in abundance in the vicinity of Jerusalem. The strong stones are durable for years, but placing and transporting them requires a tremendous amount of working hands. The cave of Zedekiah, at the foot of the old city wall of Jerusalem, was likely one of the quarries from which the giant stones were quarried. 80,000 workers worked to quarry the stones from the rock. 70,000 additional workers led them north of the city to the holiest place, the summit of Mount Moriah. In this place, according to tradition, is the foundation stone, the primary point from which the world was created. Here also took place the bonding of Isaac, a seminal event in the history of the Jewish people, a model of faith in God. And here, on Mount Moriah, in the place where God had afflicted the people with a plague that killed many, David determined the location of the future temple. Huge stones were laid as the foundations of the building. The walls of the temple and the courtyards around it began to climb in height. Now came the turn of the cypress and cedar beams. Most of the beams were used to cover the floor and walls of the temple, giving it grandeur and glory. The longest beams were incorporated into the temple's ceiling and supported the enormous roof that covered the entire temple structure. In recent years, fascinating research has been conducted around ancient wooden beams discovered on the Temple Mount. In order to determine their time, the beams were sent for carbon-14 testing at the Weizmann Institute. The results were amazing.
At least 2 of the beams found there, reused over and over again, were from a large public building from the time of the First Temple period in Jerusalem. It gave me immense satisfaction to be able to uncover this treasure from the most sacred place for our people.
The clatter of tools and the cries of workers filled Jerusalem from end to end. Only one sound is missing from the symphony, the clanking of iron instruments. Solomon forbade the use of iron tools on the Temple Mount because iron is used to create destructive tools that bring death and destruction, and it is not appropriate for a temple that would sanctify life to be built there. While work on the temple pressed forward, in other places workers were busy preparing the holy vessels that would be used in its service. In Timnah, in the southern Negev, about 25 kilometers north of Eilat, there was intensive copper production in ancient times. Deep within the earth, thousands of workers were engaged in mining copper. The copper was refined in furnaces at a temperature of over 1,000 degrees. Until a few years ago, the mining activity in Timnah was dated to the period of Egyptian rule, that is, before the time of the First Temple. But a new study, conducted by Professor Erez Ben Yosef, in collaboration with the University of Oxford in England, left the researchers stunned.
At first we thought the results were incorrect, that there had been some kind of mistake. The vast majority of the dates were from the period of the 10th century BCE, and the picture is very clear. The most intensive production was during the period when, according to biblical tradition, Solomon built the temple.
From the mines, the copper ingots were sent to the Jordan Valley. There, they were melted and cast into clay molds to create the copper vessels for the temple. The altar of burnt offering on which sacrifices were made, the molten sea, the basins of water for the priests' ablutions, and even the 2 giant pillars that stood at the gate of the sanctuary, Jachin and Boaz. Solomon saved the most precious material for the temple's interior. Anyone entering the temple gates into the entrance hall, the sanctuary, and the Holy of Holies was surrounded on all sides by a sheath of gold that shone from the floor to the ceiling with a radiant light. Here, inside the inner sanctuary, the vast chasm between the temple of the God of Israel and the pagan temples of the ancient world was revealed. In the Holy of Holies, a space reserved in pagan temples for idolatrous statues, Solomon placed the Ark of the Covenant. Inside it were the stone tablets from Mount Sinai, inscribed with the 10 Commandments, the essence of faith in one God, the values of justice, morality, and the spirit of the people of Israel. After 7 years of strenuous work, the temple stood in all its glory, and the figure of Solomon was etched in history as one of the greatest builders of all time. But despite the architectural achievement, Solomon is still not at ease. He fears that the pagan perception, which sees the temple as the physical home of God, will also seep into the temple in Jerusalem. Solomon provides the answer to this danger on the day of the temple's dedication. Before the eyes of all the people, the king kneels and offers a prayer, whose message will echo for generations. Will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heavens and the highest heavens cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? God does not physically dwell within the walls of the temple. He who dwells in the heavens is infinite, but he is attentive to all who turn to him through the temple and seek his closeness. Solomon's vision went even further. In his prayer, he asked that the temple he built in Jerusalem be open even to foreigners who were not of the people of Israel, a house of prayer for all of humanity. And any person who was in distress, attacked by an enemy, suffering from a severe illness, or whose agricultural harvest was lost, could come to the temple at any time, or even offer their prayer from afar. And you shall hear from heaven, your dwelling place, for you alone know the hearts of all humankind. David's dream had become a reality. The temple built by his son Solomon would shape Jerusalem forever as the spiritual capital of the people of Israel. The belief in one God that radiated from within it would be a source of inspiration for all of humanity. But for those who lived in those times, perhaps the greatest message the temple brought to their lives was the knowledge that no one is alone. In times of joy and happiness, anxiety and pain, every man and woman, whether from Israel or a foreign land, could come to Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, stand at the threshold of God's house, and find a gate open to the heavens.